You're grinding through every client delivery, managing every detail. I'm wondering why your consulting business won't scale past you. Or maybe you've grown, but you're bleeding cash because nobody taught you the financials that actually matter. And if you're depending on the one platform or one partner for all your leads, you're one policy change away from the trouble. Hello, I'm Paul, and welcome to my podcast. This is episode 668. And in this episode, I talked to Doug Pelletier from Trifecta Technologies. You will learn from Doug a lot because he's got so much experience to share, but in particular, why he hired a GM after 6 employees and how this decision grew his firm from a handful to 130 people, the daily cash flow discipline that saved his business after burning through $3.5 million in 17 months with a wrong hire, and why riding a platform partner's coattails isn't enough anymore, and how he's building his own pipeline. Doug founded Trifecta Technologies 34 years ago and has grown it to nearly 130 consultants serving enterprise clients like Disney and Pfizer. He's built a career catching technology waves early, from the internet in 1995 to AI exactly today. Now I'll hand you over to Doug from Trifecta. Great to have you here, Doug.
Hey, Paul, thank you so much. Glad to be here. Glad to know that I'm being part of your continued success. So looking forward to this.
Excellent. Well, why don't we kick off with who do you actually love to work with?
I call it enterprise accounts, but I think companies that are large, can afford, the kinds of services we provide are best. Within those companies, I like personally engaging with the C-level people and then letting them know that a company my size, has no fear of working with the biggest and best run companies in the world. And we've had a history of doing that for 30 some odd plus years.
Fantastic. And what are the key problems that you're helping them solve?
It really varies. So from a company like Disney, when we went into there, they had a brilliant idea called the Next Generation Experience, which was going to transform the way every person that visited the park, how they would experience it. And we helped them to select the underlying technology, write all of the software that gave what they called cast members, basically their employees, a code so they would say, they know this is Paul Higgins, and they're going to, know everything about you that you have given them in your, when you've registered to come to the park. It could be as varied as that, where you're writing this complex application, to something like with a Pfizer, where they've decided to, move off of mainframe soft technology and want to now move to a new, lighter, faster platform, where they wanted to give 9,000 sales reps, the ability to record what they have in terms of sample drug inventory. And here in the United States, that's a requirement that, major pharmaceuticals got to be able to account for every drug, every pill, everywhere in the country, not just what they had in their inventory,
Yes.
but with the 9,000 sales reps. And so we helped to write an application that would help them track it, report back to the FDA. And then as we moved on and we became more strategic partners with Salesforce, we come to that market with a set of skills that's, high-end architects. We've got that full stack software development. We have graphics designers. So we're coming to the Salesforce marketplace a little different than most Salesforce partners that are Salesforce consultants. They understand the product and how to implement it, but we come to the market with skills that are better for integration, implementation, customization of the Salesforce platform.
Fantastic. And out of interest, how did you get the Disney account in the first place?
I had hired somebody to come and help me run the business, and he came from IBM, and he had a relationship with an executive at Disney. And after a few years, we were just doing some website development type work, because that's what they thought we knew. And they had this major project to go on, And they realized very quickly that we had, the technology chops that some of the other partners working on this project did not have. So we were introduced to it. We started small, and then what was maybe $75,000 a year became $25,000 a month, became $300,000 a month. And it was basically because we had the technology skills that they really needed for this project.
Yeah, fantastic. I know that, like you said, you've been in business, circa 35 years. So you were around when the internet first formed in, 1995.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So what were some of the early patterns that you saw that maybe others missed back then in 95?
Yeah. Back in 95, I would attend some large conferences that IBM would host, and they had speakers that would get up and they would talk about sort of the future direction of technology. And, they talked about the internet. And I was reading about it in Business Week and in Fortune magazine. And at Christmas of 1995, I was home in Canada, and my older sister is a professor at the University of Toronto. And I was able to log on to the internet using her account. And I think I was up till 6:45 in the morning. I hustled into bed, messed it all up, made it look like I had some sleep. But I was fascinated by what I had heard before, and now all of a sudden seeing it. And sort of the light bulb went off, and I said, I recognized this is going to be the future of technology. It's going to be building applications around, the internet and what that provides. But I had read about it, and I thought I'd missed the market. And I look back now, 30 some odd years later, and realize that, we were there at the infancy. We were there before they had, browsers and browser technology. So it's kind of exciting looking back. And now we're sort of at this precipice of time now where everybody's talking about artificial intelligence. And if I look at where I was then and where I am today, I know it's there. I can feel it in my gut. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to transform everything, but I'm certain it is. And so asked our most senior architects on our team to dig into it, understand it better, come back to me and tell me how this is going to, we can monetize this, how we can be a great partner to companies. And back then we got started with the internet. You had companies as big as Pfizer, and they didn't have the skills. They had, 1,400 CICS COBOL programmers working on mainframes, and they didn't have the kinds of skills that we had already developed. We might have only been 6 months or a year ahead of them, but we had those skills. And the same will be true today. We are just looking at what will AI do for us. I don't think we have anything to be afraid of with AI, that it's going to be replacing jobs. But clearly, we've already can see that data is everything. And so having, command of a tool set that helps companies to organize their data and make sure, the data between systems talks to each other correctly. We're already jumping into that. So we'll be ahead of the curve, for those companies that need the skills.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and they were I can't remember exactly the source, but they were saying that in America there could be up to 6% of the workforce being replaced by some form of AI, and they related it to the Great Depression. So in the 1930s, 8% of the workforce was lost. And the thing with the Depression, they said that, people came back once the economy kicked back in. But they're saying that this 6% could be, that's it. That's why it's never going to be replaced. But I always go back to that data. And unfortunately, a lot of the LLMs, it's humans that are inputting the data, and humans are imperfect. So,
So true.
yeah, I think it's. I'm not saying that it won't replace jobs, but I do think that the one unique thing we've got is we can look forward, whereas the LLM in most cases is just using our data to tell us what we've already got. So I think that, to me, that's where the human and the AI will continue.
That's a good insight. I look at it too, that as much as it might take away some jobs, it's going to give those of us that are decision makers more insight quickly at a faster time, that we're going to either design things, invent things, build things faster, sooner, quicker, bigger, that will employ more people. So there'll be some job tasks that'll be removed, but I think it's going to put us in a position where we're going to know things so much faster that we can build things and create things faster as well.
Yeah, great. And I know that, when you started out, you effectively hired a GM pretty early. I think it was around the 6 employee mark. What was the call? Take us to that decision, and why did you hire someone, which to me back then would have been, a fairly high salaried role to get you out of the day-to-day business?
When I was at IBM, I had a manager after almost 6.5 years, and he said, Doug, I don't think you're going to go the normal route at IBM to get to the top. And typical there was you're a sales rep, regional staff, sales manager, regional staff, branch manager, regional staff, regional manager, and then you hit the executive train. And I asked him, I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I don't think you want to do the things that a sales manager wants to do. He said, you could go and speak in front of 500 college kids and 400 of them are going to want to come to work for you. And we didn't use the word, it's not in my DNA, but basically he said, it's not in your DNA to go through 400 resumes, sort it down to 20, interview 20, get it down to 3. And I said, Frank, I mean, this has been on my career path for 6 years. If you'd known this, you didn't dream this up last night. We should have changed my career path, career plan, or had some remedial education. 6 months later, I left IBM. I realized I didn't have a path to the top. But when I was out on my own, and I now have a few employees working for me, I ran into Frank and he said, Doug, I never had anybody that had better business acumen, better sales skills, better executive rapport building skills. Hire somebody that does well what you don't do. Get a good general manager, somebody that's organized. And I did. And I found somebody and he was great. He was with me for a better part of 15 years and transformed the company from being just a handful we grew to 130 at that time. And then we spun off half the company. So,
yeah. And I think two key things resonate with me there. One is that, you often can't see what's inside the label from inside the jar. So it's like getting those key mentors or those people that can help you just see it differently to what you're seeing it. I think that's critical. And then the other is, making that bold step. And, sadly, I see so many people that the only reason their business isn't growing is them, right? Because they can't let go. Everything goes back to them.
You're so spot on. I learned early on, just sort of recognize what are my strengths and weaknesses and build on that, and then hire people around, surround myself with people that can support, and don't be apologetic for the fact that I'm not really good at managing people on a day-to-day basis. I mean, people want to come to work for me and I'm a good leader, but I need somebody to be doing that management type task because it's just not in my DNA. So,
yeah, well, I remember a very good mentor of mine once told me, he said, don't ever sit on someone else's job. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, they've got their job. Don't do their job, right? You only focus on the things that you're paid to do, which is a similar thing, but it always resonated with me, right? Like, yes. And I think sadly, micromanagement is one of the other things that, just stops you from doing the things you most should do. And I know that, you, like Frank, realized your commercial acumen. I know that you told me a story around where you used that for a large client, a $30 million client, where you could see what they couldn't see, which is their financials weren't in good shape. Tell us a little bit about what did you see and what are the important financials that you look for in a business?
That was interesting. So before I sold off my IBM e-commerce group, there was a larger IBM partner that thought I'd be easy pickings and they wanted to acquire me. And I had a leader of my e-commerce team and he was actually happy to jump on and be part of something bigger. He wanted to be, and so he introduced me to this company. But before the meeting, I went through and I started just looking at their financials and what they're doing. And just looking at the financial number analysis, I could see that their cost of selling has got to be killing them. And so as we sat down and they were looking to see if they could take me over, I said, well, I think you must be seeing some pain here and you must be seeing some pain there. He said, you might be careful. You might be finding, and sure, it's going to be the minnow swallowing the whale here, just because you haven't figured out how to run your business at a cost effective manner. So sure enough, they went bankrupt or they went belly up. So never, of course, we never talked again. But
Yeah. Well, I think it's so important. Like, in a way, I worked at Coca-Cola for 18 years, and it got that sophisticated because it had been around for so long that you had your role, but half that role was being an accountant. Like, we really, really crunched the numbers, and it really helped me I did accounting at university, so I sort of had some understanding. But just that, and, it's the same. You'd go to a client, or even now I look at a client's P&L, and like, one of the things is always that they've got as soon as I see a high gross margin, I'm like, that's the first red flag. And I always go, and certainly if they're a smaller operator, like let's say half of their time is spent on delivery, they don't allocate half of that time in cost of goods sold. And they're like, my business is fine, my pricing's fine. I'm like, no, it's not, because you're not charging your time to the cost of the product. So therefore, your margin isn't 75%, it's actually 40%. And that's 10 points at least below what you need to be. So we need to fix your pricing. They're like, I've never thought of it that way. I'm like, yeah, but that's how you should be thinking, but they've just never been taught that.
Yeah. Well, I had hired this executive from IBM, and he saw things from IBM's perspective, and he always had deep pockets at IBM. He didn't really know how to run the business from an entrepreneurial perspective. And I think we burned through $3.5 million cash in 17 months, and we parted ways. But for the next few months after that, I was feeling the pain. I was having to write checks to the company just to make sure, we're making payroll, we're paying our bills. And so since that day, since this is in 2008, I said, I have a spreadsheet that I follow. It's just a cash flow. It says, here's what cash is coming in, here's what cash is going out. And I managed cash since that date. Now what is that, 17 years or something? It's important. Cash flow is more important than profitability. So that's something I've just done ever since, and I haven't stopped doing it. Every morning I go and I readjust my numbers and say, okay, this check came in, this went out, and I think that as an entrepreneur, as a small business, is really important, is making sure you really know where your money's coming from, when you're going to get paid, and that you're not, thinking you're something bigger and better than you really are, and you're going out and spending $500,000 or $600,000 fixing up an office that everybody was quite happy with before. That $600,000 or $700,000, it was so painful back then. But we got through it, and but it's really watching cash flow was helpful for us.
Yeah, I think that's a really key insight. And I think, the more, like you said, you sort of work with enterprise clients, I think that more you work with enterprise clients, you've got to sort of work on their terms. And sadly, a lot of their terms are 30 days, and that 30 days is from the end of month, right? So you're actually at 60 days, right? But you're not paying your staff every 60 days. So yeah, I think that managing that, so the higher the clients, definitely. I think the good thing with a lot of you listening to Doug and I at the moment is that you can actually charge people before you actually do the work, right? Especially if it's a retainer base. So I think normally the smaller the client, the better the cash flow. I think the larger the client, typically you got to be on their terms. And that was one of the frustrating things when I worked for Coke. They just kept dialing it up. They got it to 90 days at some point. I'm like, that's unfair. You want yours in 7, and then you're trying to, pay someone else in 90. It's like, anyway, that's how they made their money. You talked about your leadership style, and, you've been hugely successful. When did you make the decision on, I'm not going to be technical, I'm not going to code, I'm not going to get into that? Was it, made for you, or did you make a defined decision that, hey, I'm not going to do that?
No, I think that's just the way, that's my makeup. I come from being an old IBM salesman, a peddler. I know how to sell. I can see a solution. I can see a problem. I can see how my solution can fix a problem. and I know how to hire somebody or find somebody that said they're the ones that's actually going to deliver. They're going to deliver the blue sky, I promise. But I've known that since I got started. So I've always hired the technology people, and I would just go out and identify what are the problems that we need to be fixing and who are the clients that need those problems fixed, and go sell to them. And again, most of us on this podcast here are smaller companies. I've made no apology for the fact that when we were 6 employees and we closed, what was a multi-million-dollar deal at Xerox, and we bumped IBM out of the equation. So Xerox said, this is the guy I want to do business with, and looked at IBM and said, do you have a problem with that? Because we were reselling IBM technology. So it's nice to know and just feel that doesn't matter how big the company is, we can do the work. We've got the skills, we've got the people. If I have to go and re-engage or engage somebody else or grow the team, we know how to do it, but not apologizing for our size.
Yeah, fantastic. And from a leads perspective, I know that you partner strongly with Salesforce. How much of the leads are generated from Salesforce, and how much of the leads are generated by yourself?
That's a challenge, and I've made some changes at the end of 2025 to take us into 2026. I've always lived with the adage, nothing happens till somebody sells something.
Yeah.
And I think just riding on the coattails of Salesforce is nice from the standpoint of we're building on a great technology, but depending on them to be bringing you to the table and bringing you all the opportunities isn't like it was 10 years ago. Salesforce, up until 2 or 3 years ago, was growing at 20, 30% a year. Well, the last 2 years, they're growing at 7, 8% a year. So just what's going to filter down to the smaller Salesforce partners isn't what it was 10 years ago. We're dependent on going out and finding and growing and making our own business, and helping Salesforce to be successful. But we can't just depend on them to say, I've got another opportunity for you. I got another opportunity for you. It was that way for a bunch of years. It was great. But we're having to go out and build our own pipeline. Now, the good news is we've had good customers over the years, and we can say, and sometimes it was a great customer for years and they kind of built out and they were fine and they didn't need us anymore, but we're going back at them and all of a sudden they're saying, oh yeah, I wasn't even thinking of you. So we're going back at former customers that we always had a great relationship with and finding new opportunities with old customers. So old customers are becoming new friends again. So
Yeah, well, look, I think that's so critical. And I think, as you said, AI, if you can be ahead, like you said, you don't need to be, years ahead. If you're months ahead of where they are, because at the moment it's moving so fast, then you've got something that you can help them with, which, they like you said, that's something completely brand new. So I think that's a really smart strategy. And, when I was at Dreamforce in 2025, the key theme was, like you said, 7, 8% growth in Salesforce, but the partner base keeps growing at a lot higher rate. So there's basically less work for more. So, that's what I help a lot of people do, is generate their own leads. And, even if you get it to 50-50, that's fine. But I think to be all reliant upon one platform and one source of leads, it's like having only one customer or a couple of customers that account for most of your revenue. It's high risk, and if you ever try to sell that business, it's even a higher risk. So, yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on in doing that.
AI really builds on what some software that's available to us, calls intents, and they're looking at companies that there could be 20 different employees, and they're all looking up, how can I use AI in Salesforce? And it shows up, and somebody's collecting that information, and it's available to those of us that are partners with things like Apollo or Zoom Info or others. And there's a lot of information available to us. We just got to make sure we're taking advantage of information that's available today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And I think also the other thing is that whatever happens at the user level, like I still think that the user level will be conflicted. You won't be in a Salesforce or whatever. Like, I've had people on where we talk about, holograms or whatever. You'll basically have different devices. They're talking about one behind your ear, which might be coming out soon, where effectively you're not looking at a screen anymore and you're not logging in per se, but the data still has to sit somewhere. And I think Salesforce will always have a key role in that. If you even look at robotics, where if a robot is working, they've got to know everything that's in that room to be able to do it. Well, that data's got to be kept somewhere, right? So I still think Salesforce has got a role, absolutely, but I think the user interface will change. I don't know if you've got a specific view on that, Doug.
No, I would agree. And I don't know if you sit out and you're having cocktails or doing things, people bring up a subject and somebody immediately has pulled out their iPhone and says, yeah, born in 1982, or yes, he's 63 years old. I mean, you can find the answer to everything instantaneously now. So the same is true now from a business perspective, and it's taking advantage of that information that's out there and bringing it to the forefront. The other is we may build something for one customer, and that technology may be an entirely different industry.
Yes.
Could apply. So as an example, we built a little system for a company that did beer tapping systems, and it was doing measuring, the from the tap to the keg and things of that sort.
Yes.
And we showed it to, a $6 billion company, what we had done there, and they said, "That's fantastic. We could use something like that." And they can already envision how it is. The application was entirely different, but it was the fact that they trusted that we could build something like that. We got another $1.5 million project out of a customer that had been $1.5 million customer for, better part of 8 years prior to that. So it's interesting. So going to market, it's sometimes taking solutions for one industry and reapplying it to an entirely different industry.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. And the other thing is, if you, like I was fortunate enough to be, quite senior in Coke, you realize that it's very competitive space for, the pyramid gets less, right? So any key innovation that can bring not just revenue and profitability to the company, but also an executive's strategic edge against their peers, that is absolutely critical. So if you get the right person and you make them look good, right, and you deliver a great product, it's all about them, it's not about you, well, then that can make a significant difference. And I think if I was playing an enterprise, I haven't been in 14 years, but I'm assuming it's no different now to what it was back then. So I think that's a really important thing. And what happens there, that's really key sales skills and client relationship skills, right? And you need that on top of the technology. And I think, sadly, a lot of Salesforce partners get so in love with the technology, they forget about all the stuff that you're good at, which is you still got to sell it, right? And you still got to manage the client.
Yep.
Yeah. Look, I could talk forever, Doug, but what we're going to do now is just pause and thank our sponsors, and then we're going to come back to the rapid fire.
All right. Sounds good.
Quick break. If you're getting value from these stories, join my newsletter. Every week I share what's working with tech consultants escaping the project grind. Who to target, what business models work best, real client transformations. No fluff, just the pattern I've seen work over 200 times. Join at paulhigginsmentoring.com newsletter. Now back to the podcast. So Doug, I'm going to ask you 4 questions and just want a rapid fire response. Are you ready for that?
Let's hope so.
All right. So any other AI tool that you're personally using that we haven't spoken about today?
Not right now, but I am exploring it. So to build on AI, we are evaluating, actually getting trained on products like Snowflake and Databricks.
Yes.
We intend on being a strategic player in that market. And those 2 products complement Salesforce. They don't compete with Salesforce. But having good data is important as we get into the AI space.
Yeah, perfect. I'll send you some great podcasts. I'll listen to the owners of both of those companies on podcasts. I think we've covered the go-to-market, which is the second. The third question is, where does Doug go to learn?
Yeah, I'll attend some conferences a little bit. I used to do that a lot, not so much. Now it's probably, listening to employees. having them send me podcasts or, marketing material that's available online, and I'll read it and study it. And then I tend to go back to my employees and say, what do you think about this? How do you think we could take advantage of it, and let them come back and feed me. But I am less out there in the market than I used to be 25 or 30 years ago. But so I'm depending on my employees to a great degree.
Fantastic. And the last question, you've been in business for 35 years, been hugely successful. Or what do you know now that you wish you had have known at the start?
South Florida, where I play golf with a lot of gazillionaires that went to Wall Street. I had no idea what Wall Street was like. I would have been great on Wall Street. But I'm going to say, just from the running of my business, I think just managing the cash, has been critical for us in our success, but really staying focused on sales. And in 2026, we are definitely doing that. We've got some sales leadership from a young fellow named Kevin Flynn. He had 17 years at Salesforce, sold for Xerox before that. He is already in a short while transforming, the daily work that our sales team is doing, and he's going to help build a bigger team. So staying focused on sales is everything right now.
Yeah, brilliant. Great way to finish the podcast. And I really appreciate you coming on today, Doug.
Hey, listen, thanks so much. If you get to South Florida, you like to play golf, come and see me.
I'll take you up on that for sure.
Thanks so much.
Doug has been in business for 34 years, and his advice comes down to three things. Know your strengths, hire people who cover your weaknesses, and watch your cash flow every single day. Cash flow matters more than profitability, and staying focused on sales is everything. Reach out to Doug on LinkedIn and thank him and ask him questions. You can learn more about his work at Trifecta, and the links will be in the show notes, and you can watch our great interview on the Paul Higgins Mentoring channel on YouTube. See you next time on my podcast. What's your key takeaway from today? I'd love to hear. Want weekly insights on who to target and what to sell? Join my newsletter at paulhigginsmentoring.com/newsletter and share this with another tech consultant ready to escape the project grind.